It all started with the fairy tale forest. 31 fairy tales and tons of details to discover. We promised this video many times, but now we take you on a full tour through the fairy tale forest and tell you everything you can discover here. Let's dive in. Don't rush into the fairy tale forest too fast. Pay attention to this witch on top of the gate. She's called Visculamia. And did you know there is a winter version of this statue? Actually, most statues in the park are changed for winter Efteling. On busy days, you can even meet her in the fairy tale forest as a live character. Near every fairy tale you find a fairy tale book with the short version of the fairy tale in 4 languages: Dutch, English, German and French. But there's one fairy tale with a 5th language. The first fairy tale is one of the 10 that was here since opening day, Sleeping Beauty. You can see her castle. Did you know that in the opening year there was no interior visible? Efteling added the interior 1 year later, in 1953. Millions and millions of feet have traveled these stones, and they polished them so much that they became slippery. Efteling fixed that during the last maintenance in 2024. All inhabitants of the castle are fast asleep. And look at his hand, his right hand. It's enormous. Here we see Sleeping Beauty. And look at the candles, those are asleep as well. And when you look at the napkin in her hand, you see a drop of blood and the old logo of the Efteling, the Efteling E. Even the crows are under the spell, and also these are fast asleep. If you don't walk over the castle, you can pass by the castle over this path. And here you have a great look at this new addition to the fairy tales. This guard is only here since the summer of 2024. Look at the key that the owl holds, because you can see the old logo of Efteling, the E, in this key. The second part is the gnome village. Not an actual fairy tale, but gnomes are very important characters in the stories of Grimm. Here you can visit several toadstool houses and meet up with the gnomes that live there. One of the many details is this pole. Yell into it and you might wake up the fisherman. Did you know that actually every child in the Netherlands has such a photo, sitting on one of the toadstools in the fairy tale forest? It's such a tradition that it was even part of the exhibition of 70 years Efteling at the Noord-Brabant Museum in Den Bosch. Did you know that this gnome might be the largest fairy tale in the forest? When you look inside, you can see a gnome playing music. He's playing the minuet in G minor, the song you can hear all over the fairy tale forest coming out of the toadstools. And don't forget to look up. You can see a face in the tree. There is more than one inhabitant for this toadstool. Look up to the chimney. There's a mouse peeking out. Over here, look at the 2 windows above the door. There's a squirrel and a mouse hidden there. And since the last renovation of the gnome village, some of the gnomes are talking. But most of it's just gibberish. Normally you learn your children to don't touch anything in a theme park, but that's different in the fairy tale forest. please encourage them to push on door handles like these, because then a gnome is coming out to check if there is someone visiting him. There is a special summer and winter version of the text that this gnome says. During summer he says, well, there's nobody outside there for me, and neither is there. Maybe I'm mistaken. During winter he says, look, people out there in the cold. Brr, nothing for me, I'm going back inside. Also at this gnome house there is a hidden animal. Behind the logs there's a rabbit. Next up, one of the icons of the park, Longneck, or in Dutch, Langnek. Did you know this fairy tale isn't called Longneck? It's called The Six Servants, and you can see all 6 servants under the roofing of the food outlet Kogelo, right across the street of Longneck. Don't forget to eat a stroopwafel here. It's a delicious Dutch treat. The voice telling the story isn't the voice of Longneck. This is the voice of Peter Reinders, one of the founding fathers of the Efteling. And look at top of the food outlet Kogelo. This is a statue of the servant Kogelo. He was originally in the park as part of the story. This statue isn't the original version that was in the park. This version you can see in the Efteling Museum at the Antropiek Square. We made a special Patreon only video showing you all there is to see in the museum. Next to Kogelo we find Hollebolle Gijs. He is not one of the 6 servants, but he is actually the most famous trash bin in the world. There are several in the park, and 2 of them in the fairytale forest. In the fairytale forest there are a lot of signs. On top of each bin you see this statue of Tam Tam, with underneath papier hier, the famous sentence of Hollebolle Gijs, asking for paper. And these signs are all over the place as well, with different messages. This one says don't litter the park. But a fun fact, all these texts do rhyme. Next up, Red Riding Hood. The version we see in the park today isn't the one that was here in the old days. Red Riding Hood was one of the first 10 fairy tales in the forest. The statue on top of this sign is a copy of the original version of Red Riding Hood as she was seen in the park, together with Wolf. We see Red Riding Hood right before she enters the house of Grandmother. Take a close look at her. You can see her ring the bell, and then Krakeeltje will move as well to warn her. You can take a look inside the house of Grandmother. The clock depicts the right time, like all clocks in the fairy tale forest, except of one. And take a look at the face in the wood near the bed of Grandmother. The eyes do open and close. Pinocchio, next up. And this is a fairy tale with the 5th language. Because Pinocchio is original an Italian story, it also is told in Italian. The profession of Geppetto is wood carving, and you can see that all around his house. For example, these pillars are all little owls playing music instruments. You can see a dragon head, but also inside there's a lot to discover. Did you know you can see the blue fairy, chimney cricket peeking out? Even a jack-in-the-box comes out when you turn the key on the music box that is outside the window.
Hallo? Pinocchio?
Nowadays the fox and the cat peek out of these barrels here, as part of the story of Pinocchio. But in the old days there was a Hollebolle Gijs here. Captain Gijs, that is now over at Ruigrijk near the Flying Dutchman. Use the fishing rod to tickle the nose of the monster fish and you might see Pinocchio peeking out. And did you know that in the old days you could smell rotten fish here? It wasn't the nicest smell, so the Efteling removed this effect. Everywhere in the fairytale forest you see these road signs telling you what the next fairytale will be. In this case, the red shoes. The next fairytale is the Red Dancing Shoes, a story by Hans Christian Andersen. But this isn't the brutal original version. They don't chop off her feet here, only chop off the shoes. Wait till the end of the story, because then the shoes will start dancing. Next we'll meet the Troll King. He predicts your future. And what he's telling exactly, we don't know. But you can hear him laugh or saying aye aye aye. So we're sure you will understand what he tries to tell you. And we say when you stand in front of him while he predicts your future, you might even feel his magic. The next fairy tale is The Naughty Princess. Just like the Troll King, this fairy tale is an original Efteling fairy tale. It was written to make sure they could introduce the technique into the park. This parrot repeats everything you say when the eye is red. In this tower lives Rapunzel, but not only Rapunzel. A real-life pigeon made his nest in the back of the tower. During winter, not only most of the statues are replaced by a special winter version, but there's also special winter decoration, like this winter camp with several forest animals. The Little Mermaid, she's just a static statue, but did you know that this isn't the first fairy tale that was in this place? In the old days, this was the Love Well, and after that, it was the Dancing Dolphin. You can still see hints to the previous fairy tales on the back wall of this fairy tale. There are tons of details in the fairy tale forest, and some are really well hidden. Just before you meet Dragon, don't forget to look up the trees, because you see a broom and a knapsack. This is where a witch landed in the forest. Just like the gnome village, Dragon is just a depiction of a famous fairy tale character. You can try to steal his crown and he tries to scare you off. Did you know that Dragon wasn't the first fairy tale that was in this place? At the opening of the fairy tale forest, this was the Chinese nightingale. You can still see the branch where the nightingale was sitting. And also the Chinese dragons on top of the wall were already there when it opened as the Chinese nightingale. The next fairy tale is The Wolf and the Seven Goats, and it starts with Mother Goat going out for grocery shopping. But there are more details. In the back you see the well, where the wolf will fall in at the end of the story. The first room is a bedroom with a lot of animals playing around. And that this is a house of goats you can see over at the mirror. There's a goat head on top of it. And don't forget to look at the blankets in the bed. There's a mouse under there as well. And the second room is the living room, where we can see the goats playing a game during summer or eating a Christmas dinner during winter. The seventh goat is hidden in the clock. And don't forget to look under the bed, because there is a cat coming out once in a while. There are also a lot of details to discover at this fairy tale on the outside. For example, you can see that bad luck is coming up because the horseshoe is upside down. Also, we see maybe the largest hidden detail in the complete fairy tale forest. When you walk out of this fairy tale, just turn around, because you can see a giant hidden face in the building. And on top of the roof, there's a squirrel peeking up once in a while. You can't only see and hear the next fairy tale, but also smell the next fairy tale. Hansel and Gretel has a great scent hanging around the fairy tale. There's a different scent in the summer and during winter. Don't forget to push the handle, because then the witch will come out. During winter, the Efteling adds several gingerbread men to this fairy tale. And they all have their own situations. Can you find them all? There are 6 of them. And here the Efteling has the newest fairy tale in the works. Princess and the Pea will open in spring 2025 and is connected to the Grand Hotel. And even the visitors of Grand Hotel will have their own entrance to the fairy tale forest. Since 1952, this well is in the Efteling, and you can hear the story of Mother Hall. But you can also meet her since 2006 in the house right further on the road. We didn't tell you yet, but look at the wind vanes in the fairy tale forest, and actually all over in the Efteling, because most of them are themed and have something to do with the fairy tale or the story where you can find them. Here you can meet Mother Hall, and this is an interactive element. Call for Mother Hall near this bucket and she will come out and make it snow. Once in a while she makes a silly joke. Did you know that the looks of Mother Hall are based on the looks of the grandmother of the designer Robert Jaap Jansen? The flowers underneath the window are snowflakes. This is a hint to the story of Mother Hall that's about snow. Look also under the doors, because under one door you see gold and under the other you see tar. Both of the sisters were covered in gold and the other was covered in tar. Mother Hall wasn't the first inhabitant of this building. Before the Efteling opened, people lived in this house. And in the old days, there was even a fairy tale museum inside of this building. Here, there was the first version of the mirror of the evil queen of Snow White. This fellow was the mascot of the Efteling for a long time. This is Gnome Kleine Boodschap, what means something like doing a number 1. And maybe that's the reason why he is close to the restrooms. The next fairy tale is one in 2 parts. Table be laid, donkey lift your tail. And we started this in Herberg de Efteling. And Efteling may sound familiar. It was the name of the neighborhood here. But many people said Efteling. And We think this is why Efteling is called Efteling. It doesn't mean something, but it refers to the old name of the neighborhood. Inside the inn you will meet this evil club, and he hits everybody who has something bad in his mind. In the fairy tale the club came in a bag, and this is the bag where he came in. In the second part of the inn we see this scene where you can see the table be laid. And pay attention to the dog because he tries to steal the sausages that will appear on the table. And the club out the story isn't only visible in the first room of the inn. Also here at the door handle we see a hand holding the club. Yeah. The second part of the story is outside on the square. Here you find Donkey Lift Your Tail. For only 50 cents he will lift his tail. You can pay with a coin or contactless with your bank card. Did you know there are 10 different coins to collect? Many people don't know that this isn't the original location of the donkey. In the old days the donkey was located near the playground where you now can find Volk van Laaf. The next fairy tale is Snow White, and we start at the mirror of the evil queen. This part of the fairy tale forest might be a little bit scary, and that it's scary you can see at the ceiling. There are cracks in the ceiling, and also the heads in the corners are all scared. When you walk in, you can see the evil queen visiting her mirror and changes into a real witch.
Spiegeltje, spiegeltje aan de wand. Wie is nu de mooiste in Nederland? Dat kan niet. Dat kan niet waar zijn, je moet je vergissen. Sneeuwwitje is dood. Ze is dood. Het kan niet waar zijn. Raak! 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 Mensen waren niet sneeuwwitje nu bij de zeven plaatsen. Voor wie zij zocht en zijn zo charmant is hij nog net op de hoogte gegaan.
When you're scared, don't rush out the castle. Look behind this gate. You can see the poisoned apples in the basket there. And on top of the pillar, there's a crow overlooking the story. Inside the cave, we can see Snow White in her glass coffin. Listen closely, you can hear the gnomes sobbing about her death. The next fairy tale is the fairy tale of the six swans. The only ride in the fairy tale forest. And make sure to make a ride because you can see an extra detail when you're in the swans on your right side just before you leave the cave. And pay special care to the floor. You can see that there were swans walking by. Not only can you see the fairy tale of the six swans while sitting in a swan, you can also enter the castle. You can see the scene here as well, and the story is told to you of course in Dutch, by the famous Dutch actress Wieteke van Dort. The next fairy tale, Cinderella, even starts before we leave the area of the Six Swans. At this gravestone, this is the grave of the mother of Cinderella, the place where she came to grieve after she wasn't able to go to the ball. And before you enter the castle of Cinderella, look up. Behind the window you can see the evil stepmother peeking out once in a while. When we enter the house of Cinderella, we see this clock. And did you know that this is the only clock in the fairy tale forest that doesn't depict the actual time? You have to wait till midnight, because then you will be sure to see the full show. And that was Cinderella, the only fairy tale in the fairy tale forest that doesn't depict the saddest part of the story. Most of the stories are told just before it becomes better. And did you know that here in this fairy tale you can see the only prince in the entire fairy tale forest? And here at the Herauten Square you have the most hidden fairy tale of them all. Did you know that these pigeons actually are a fairy tale? Those are the bridal clothes of Gene Nova. You can buy special food for the pigeons at the Kleine Klaroen at the square. And on this bag you can read the story of the fairy tale in Dutch. It is a lot of fun to feed the birds. Did you know that these pigeons were colored in the old days? First they were painted with paint and afterwards with color in their food. But nowadays these are all natural pigeons. Their tail is on top of the cave of Snow White. You can see it from the Herauten Square. Whenever you don't want to take the bag home with you, it's of course also good food for Opa Gijs, the second hollebolle Gijs you can find in the fairy tale forest. And he is very pleased with all his additional food. Right in front of the Kleine Klaroen we find the Frog Fountain. This is the fairy tale of the Frog Prince. This is one of the oldest fairy tales in the fairy tale forest, and it was the inspiration for the Aquanura show, the fountain show that ends your day at Efteling. You can hear it at the end of Efteling Symfonica. There you hear Peter Reiner say, "Wat een prachtige klok. What a magnificent clock." He is talking about this clock at the Herauten Square. It is the magical clock. Don't rush by too fast, because every 50 minutes this magical clock will come to life. The knights will blow their horn, the knights on their horses will ride, and you can hear the bell ring. It's truly the essence of Efteling. When you don't understand the story, don't bother. Listen to the music. This was the main theme of the first two Aquanura symphonies, the tune of the magical clock. And when you walk underneath the Prince Gate, look up. This is the sign of the government of Loon op Zand. This sign tells you that for the 15th birthday of the Efteling, they created a special fairy tale, the Indian Water Lilies. It's an animatronic show that comes to life every 5 minutes. It's written by the Belgian Queen Fabiola. Take some time for it, because it's worth it. You can see the water lilies come to life in front of your own eyes on the famous music of African beat. Before you enter the cave, you visit this square. At the opening of the fairy tale, this was completely crowded with a queue to visit the fairy tale. Did you know that the voice of these guards is Ton van de Ven, the second head of design of Efteling in his really young days? What is he telling? Well, some house rules. That you have to wait while the door is closed and that you can come in to discover the secret for your own while open. Nowadays the doors are always open. And of course, mind your litter. Don't throw it on the ground. Throw it in the baskets. On several places in the fairytale forest and in the entire Efteling, you see these kinds of signs. They make you aware of pickpocketers, there where it gets dark. Pay attention to these signs, because the picture on there is always in style of the attraction of the fairy tale. You will find it. That was the show of the Indian water lilies. Did you pay special attention to the building in the back of the scene? Because we will see that building once more during our tour. Between the Indian water lilies and Tam Tam, you will find the Fairytale Forest Theatre. Here are shows about the fairy tale characters that live in the forest. All shows are in Dutch, so if you don't speak Dutch, you might want to skip this. But when you do speak Dutch, these are fun stories. Once we came out of the Indian water lilies, we hear a loud snoring, and that's the snoring of the giant of Tam Tam. When you yell for Tam Tam in this hollow tree, he will come out and try to pick the boots of the giant. And there's even a little hidden detail. When you watch into the back of the giant, you'll see a little mice peek out. Only during winter Efteling, you can see the socks of the giant hanging here to dry at the campfire. A nice opportunity for a creative picture.
Hoopla! Niemand weet.
Nobody knows that Rumpelstiltskin is my name. Maybe not the smartest to say when you don't want anybody to know your name. The next fairy tale is Rumpelstiltskin. His house is built under the roots of an old tree. And when you look at the chimney, you can see that it's warm inside because there's smoke coming out.
Niemand weet dat ik Repelsteeltje heet. Niemand weet dat ik Repelsteeltje heet. Hoepla.
The next fairy tale is the saddest of them all, the little matchstick girl. Let's check it out. At the first window we see a city in winter. This is the same city as you can see in the main scene of this fairy tale. And when you look at the ground, you see some mice. These mice can be found at almost every fairy tale in the fairytale forest. They are called piekmuisjes, or mice drawn by Piek. When these candles are lit, don't walk in because the show is going. Wait till they go out and then walk on into the next show.
Een kachel ligt op, in stralende gloed. Is het een wonder? Ziet ze het goed? Het droombeeld vervaagt, verdwijnt met de wind. Wonderen bestaan, maar niet voor dit kind. Een tweede stokje, het vlamt op in haar hand. Een feestmaal verschijnt wanneer het ontbrandt. Een gansje gebraad, hoe kan die gans leven? Een droom die vervliegt, het duurt maar heel even. Een derde vlam tovert de glansvolle pracht van een twinkelende kerstboom die verdwijnt in de nacht. Kerstboomlichtjes die als sterren verstrooien, ze stijgen op om de hemel te tonen. Eén ster in het zwerk raast aan de andere voorbij. In herinnering komt wat grootmoeder zei. Een vallende ster, een ziel gaat op reis naar hemelse vrede, naar Gods paradijs. En zie, daar is Grootje, zij reikt daar een kind, zacht stralend van goedheid met een liefde die bindt. Ach Grootje, lief Grootje, ach voer mij toch mee naar de innige warmte van uw hemelse vrede. En zie, in grootmoeders armen ontfiet zij deze aard, voor eeuwig voor zorgen en rampspoed gespaard. In de sneeuw blijft dit meisje, in kou overleven, haar
Outside of the fairy tale, we find these two gravestones, one of Granny and one of the little magic girl. Did you know that this fairy tale was designed by Michel de Dulles? He became an Imagineer at Disney World and now head of creatives at Disneyland Paris. The name we can read on the gravestone of Granny, Eleonora, is the name of his own grandmother. When you visit the main show of the Little Matchstick Girl, not only look and listen to the story, but also use your nose. They use scents to enhance the story. You can smell the fire, you can smell the goose, and even the Christmas tree. And then we'll meet Kniezoor. Actually, I already told him.
Blij u terug te zien.
I'm also glad to see you again.
Mensen, dat is waar. Maar u bent toch zeer bijzonder.
It's so
Mag
good
ik
to
u
hear.
daar hartelijk voor danken.
You're
Voor
welcome.
die bijzonderheid. En een fijne dag gewenst.
Okay, that was a very special moment. Kniezoor thanked me for being so special. I visit him so often. Knies in the Kniezoor is a talking tree. And when you have your Efteling app set right in the right mode, he can also say your name. He knows 2,400 names in Dutch, English, German and French. It isn't a fairy tale, but a special meetup with Kniezoor, it's a magical moment. After meeting Kniezoor, we see the famous story about the emperor's new clothes. They are telling you the story and of course show you the emperor in his new clothes. But did you know that the designers of the park shaped the emperor after a former manager of the park, Bart de Boer? They thought he was a little bit narcissistic because he thought he was the main character of Efteling. Well, the designers made him one of the main characters.
Liever deed dan flaneren. Voor ieder uur van de dag had hij prachtige nieuwe kleren. Het volk gehoorzaamde, zoals altijd, achter gouden hekken, maar braaf zijn bevel. Verplicht gesteld hem te bedienen en zijn ijdele ego te strelen. 2 onderdanen waren verboden. Zoveel ijdelheid was echt ongehoord. Ze bedachten daarom een list en verschenen bij het paleis aan de poort. Ze knielden voor de keizer, kusten zijn voeten en maakten hem wijs. Wij zijn keizerlijke kleermakers en reizen van paleis naar paleis. Speciaal voor u weven wij een gebaad, zo kleurrijk en zo speciaal. Een stof onzichtbaar voor de domme. Is dat niet fenomenaal? De keizer beval hen die stof te weven, verwerkbaar tot nieuwe kledij. Als naaiatelier werd het theehuis gewezen. Met muntgoud betaald werden zij. De kleermakers gingen aan het werk. Dit was niet zomaar iets. Ze knipten, weefden en naaiden het allermooiste. Niets. De keizer kon niet langer wachten. De minuten voelden als uren. Daarom stuurde hij zijn eerste minister om stiekem bij de kleermakers te gaan gluren. De minister werd bleek. Hij zag de kleermakers druk knippen, weven en vouwen. Maar hun handen waren leeg. Moest hij zichzelf nu als dom beschouwen? De minister, hevig geschrokken, bedacht daarom snel een tactiek. Met veel enthousiasme vertelde hij de keizer: het wordt werkelijk magnifiek. Verheugd door het goede bericht en voorafgegaan door zijn keizerlijke stoet, toog de keizer daarop naar het theehuis, zijn nieuwe kleren tegemoet. de spiegel, maar zag de kleren, hoe goed hij ook vond. De keizer voelde zich dom, maar zijn hofhouding stond te juichen. De kleren moesten wel mooi zijn, zo probeerde hij zichzelf te overtuigen. De keizer haalde diep adem toen hij zijn volk achter de poorten zag staan. Maar met opgeheven hoofd besloot hij toen om toch maar naar buiten te gaan. Maar hij heeft niets aan. Hij heeft helemaal niets aan, riep plots een kleine vrouw. Het was even stil. Maar toen lachte iedereen de keizer uit. Met schaamrood op zijn wangen, maar met een zo waardig mogelijke tred, besefte de keizer dat hij lelijk uit zijn hemd was gezet.
Did you know that the system behind this fairy tale is the same as the ride vehicles of Symbolica? It's also designed by EFT rides. Above the gate we see a text in Latin, and this means "My beauty is my greatest gift to the entire world." A quote by Emperor Narcissus. This flower you can see in top as well. While designing the fairy tale tree, the designers of the park tied cameras to their knees to make sure that it was revealed in the most impressive way possible to a child. The next up, fairy tale tree, Sprookjesboom. Actually, he is maybe a strange guy in the fairy tale forest. Yes, it's a speaking tree, but he isn't telling a fairy tale. He is telling what the fairy tale characters do after the park is closed. Characters from different fairy tales meet up and have their own adventures. The stories of Fairy Tale Tree are in Dutch, so you might not understand them. But you can have interaction with him by talking in the root that is in front of the tree. Do you want to hear a story of him and make sure to understand it? We have a subtitled version of one of the stories at our channel. We make sure to put the link down in the description. One of the last fairy tales in the forest is the gardener and the fakir. He helps the gardener to grow the tulips. How this works? Well, it's just based on floating water. And when they are up, you can see him fly over to the other tower. It took Yolanda years before she discovered how this optical illusion works. Do you know how it works? Let us know down in the comments. And did you recognize the building? This building can also be seen at the Indian water lilies. In the old days, this was the next fairy tale after visiting the Indian water lilies. When you see water in the Efteling, you might also see such a wooden plank. This isn't for children to climb out of the water, but this is a duck ladder. And make sure that all the ducks, big and small, are able to come out of the water. The last fairy tale is the Chinese nightingale. We already told you this isn't the first depiction of this fairy tale, but this one is standing since 1999. Let's get in. Before you enter the castle of the Chinese nightingale, you must know that this one can be scary for little children. So, if your child is a little bit scared of dark and the theme of death, you might want to skip this fairy tale.
bij het zien van de blauwe bol. Maar de zon van de nachtegaal trof de keizer direct in het oog. Van ontroering die de tranen hem overvlogen. Dit is het allergrootste wat ik ooit heb gevoeld, stamelde hij. En iedere avond en nacht verscheen de nachtegaal aan zijn raam en zong voor de keizer met hoge stem. Maar op een dag werd er in het hoofd wat afgelopen, waarin hij de armste nachtegaal verzet met kostbare diamanten en eet. Als je het dan zong zijn hoofd deze was veel mooier dan de en kon net zo mooi zingen. Hij zei de nachtegaal dat hij niet meer veel hoefde te komen, want hij had nu een hele hoop. En de hele dag lang luisterde de keizer naar zijn oude man. Toen had hij iets wat spannend. Die dacht en tot de keizer op liefde leerde niet bang. De keizer was ontroerd. En het ziet van Efteling. In heel China wordt iedereen naar een zin gevoerd. Want alle mensen doen het heel om te kijken.
Misschien horen van je macht, je kroon, je zwaard en het keizerlijk vaandel. Ik zal je grootste bezit opnemen, je leven. Oh, het leven dat je wegvloeit in mijn reis, mijn diensten staan. Nee. Enkel de waarde van onvoorwaardelijke liefde en trouw zou je nog kunnen redden. Want de koude des doods.
De keizer leeft.
Goedemorgen.
And at the end of the fairy tale forest, there is a nice garden. Take a moment to walk through this garden because you will see a statue of the brothers Grimm and this memorial for the 3 founding fathers of Efteling, Anton Pieck, Peter Reinders and Van der Heijden, the mayor of Kaatsheuvel. The final statue in the fairy tale forest is Kindervreugd. This is a statue given to the Efteling for their 10th birthday by all the employees together. And here ends our tour through the fairy tale forest, and as you can see, it is getting dark. It took us a complete day to make this video. But we did it with a lot of love because we are so proud having you as one of our loyal supporters of our channel. We hope you enjoyed this video and that you have learned tons and tons of facts that you didn't know before. We hope to see you in our next video. See ya!